let's go ahead and get into this Airbnb game because they've made some changes, and part of me kind of I'm starting to wonder if they've lost their damn mind. But let's just go ahead and get into it. So we're gonna share my screen, and we're going to break down this policy change. In fact, a lot of people have been kind of missing the Airbnb videos. They've been kind of wondering, like, Elijah, what's going on? Like, why aren't you covering Airbnb? Well, here's this segment for you. All right. So Airbnb has recently changed their policy, and this policy affects your cancellation. So as a host, if a guest books to stay and they just decide for whatever reason they can't come anymore, depending on your cancellation policy, when they cancel, they'll either get a partial refund, a full refund, and depending on what policy you're using, that determines your payout. Now, why is this important for people who might be guests? Like, why should we get anything? Think of it like this: as a host, your calendar is wide open, okay, and it's available for everyone to book. But you, as a guest, book. Let's say you book a house a month or two in advance for a vacation. So that's great and all, but for whatever reason, a few days before it's time for your stay to start, something comes up and you can't make the trip anymore. So you cancel your stay. Well, that means that all those days someone else could have booked the host property, but you were taking up that spot. So there's got to be some kind of payment for that, because even if the host re gets their book, re gets the place booked, they're usually going to have to drop their rate to get someone in there, because most people, especially with houses, book further in advance. That's why the host has to get something for that. In most cases, unless they have something known as a flexible policy, which is insane if you're going to be operating the houses. But I just wanted to give you all the context of why this is so important and why that's relevant. So we're going to read changes to standard cancellation policies effective October 11th, 2025. In fact, let me actually drop this link in the description, in the comments, in case anyone wants to actually check this out. Airbnb policy. All right. So the link is in the chat if y'all actually want to check this out yourselves. Starting on October 1st, 2025, all standard cancellation policies for shorter stays or less than 28 days will include a 24-hour cancellation period, allowing guests to cancel for a full refund up to 24 hours after the reservation is confirmed, as long as the reservation was confirmed at least 7 days before check-in based on the listing's local time. So that's essentially saying that it doesn't matter what your cancellation policy is. If they book a stay more than a week out, they're entitled to a full refund potentially with these new changes to the policy. Um, I'm gonna be honest. I deal in apartments. In fact, for those of y'all that want to know more about my Airbnb setup, I'll link the card on the playback where I kind of broke down like how I made six figures a year, and I shared how I invested my YouTube money into getting apartments and then rental arbitraging them on Airbnb. But I mainly deal in apartments, studio apartments at that, and the lead time or the amount of time someone is actually booking the stay, the difference between when they're booking the stay to when they actually arrive is usually about a week. Now, people can book further in advance, but generally speaking, studio apartments are kind of in line with hotels from that perspective. Versus, let's say, a house or a mansion or some of this stuff y'all have seen maybe more on TV that people are booking. People tend to book those type of stays months in advance. So this is something that affects people who have houses in their real estate portfolio much more than someone like me who's dealing in studio apartments, because most people are booking within a week's time anyway. So I find it very interesting that they chose specifically a week for that time frame. We are introducing a new limited policy which allows for guests to cancel until 14 days before check-in for a full refund. I guess we'll have to see how that plays out when they release it. I personally don't have any interest in using it as a host. Again, I usually use a modern policy. So the modern policy states that a guest can cancel up to 5 days. Well, I might just need to pull it up. But essentially, if someone books your property and there's a modern policy, then they'll get a full refund as long as it's more than 5 days out from when they booked. After 5 days, once 5 days from check-in has been reached, then they'll get a partial refund. And that can range from half to like between 30% and half, depending on the day. In most cases, it's usually half, but yeah. And I'll keep that. But once my calendar is kind of booked, but let's say all of July is booked, I'll switch it to the firm policy, which is a more stricter version of a cancellation policy. But once someone checks out, then I'll switch it back to the modern policy. That's just a little trick I use as a host to make more money, because if someone does cancel under a firm policy, just being honest, we get more money. But I don't really want people tying up my calendar. So it's more so a deterrent against that. Like I really want people, if they book with me, they know they're coming. I don't want flaky, fickle guests booking my calendar, which is why, for the most part, I don't ever touch the flexible policy. The strict policy will no longer be available for new listings. Any current listings with a strict policy will be converted to firm unless you opt out and choose to keep strict policy strict by October 1st, 2025. For those of y'all don't know, strict policy is essentially you have 48 hours to cancel and get a full refund. After that, it's a wrap. If you need to cancel, the host keeps pretty much all the money. At that point, if you want to get a payout, you need to consult with your travel insurance company. Now, here's the interesting part, okay? I'm part of a Facebook group called the Hosts of Airbnb Automated, and someone was complaining about this exact policy. I didn't even know that this was happening until I saw them complaining about it in the Facebook group. Come to find out, I checked my email, and I saw that they sent out an email about this, but it ended up in my updates tab or something, so I clicked on it and saw this. Now, anyone in their right mind as a host is going to want to opt out, because more options is better. And if you have the option to use a strict policy, then why wouldn't you want to keep it? So, especially if you're a house, but even for studio apartments like me, it never hurts to have more options. So what happens when I actually click this button? Because I clicked it thinking like, okay, well, I definitely want to opt out of this. And it doesn't go anywhere. Y'all see this? It straight up doesn't go anywhere. So I'm backing up, and at least on desktop, it doesn't take me anywhere. Now, I don't have the screenshot pulled up. Otherwise, I'd show y'all. But when I click on it on mobile, it says that they just straight up removed the strict cancellation policy is just going to be removed on October 21st, and there's nothing you can do about it. They don't say it like that, but that's the gist of it. So let me get this straight. You put this in the policy, and then you have the option to opt out. But then all of a sudden, you can't opt out anymore. It's just, oh, we're just getting rid of it altogether. My view is too many people saw this and were opting out, and rightfully so. It's one thing if any new listing you make will automatically not have the strict cancellation policy as an option, but this opt out was for your existing listings. Maybe they thought I don't know. I think too many people were opting out, and then they freaked out like, oh, you know what, we're just going to get rid of it entirely. And they haven't even updated this policy, which is kind of crazy. So people, hosts feel a certain way about this, and I really don't blame them, especially if you're dealing with the houses, or not even just houses. Let's say if you're dealing in like 3-unit apartments, three bedroom apartments, maybe even 2-bedroom apartments. You might just want to have access to that strict cancellation policy, but with it not having an option, yeah. So why is Airbnb doing this? I think it's because they're under a lot of pressure, because a lot of guests are just flaky, and they book a place, but then they see it has a strict cancellation policy, but they go ahead and book it. Then they decide they don't want to go somewhere. And then the inevitable happens where they have to cancel and they don't get a refund. And when that happens, Airbnb may or may not give them a refund, but it doesn't come oftentimes. It's not coming from the host because it's their fault, and they don't really have much of a claim since they didn't even check into the host property, so they can't even make some kind of fraudulent story up that, hey, I saw bugs all over the place. Why can you see bugs all over the place if you cancel 2 days before you even arrive? So it wouldn't make sense. So Airbnb, if they do give them a refund just to try and keep their reputation intact, they're subsidizing these refunds because it's not coming from us, the host. So they're giving it to the guests out of their own pockets, and that's going to start to add up. So I think that's why they're getting rid of this strict cancellation policy. And I think that, well, everyone's already upset about it, but this is going to give the other platforms like the competitors like Verbo and Booking.com and some of these smaller platforms an edge. And they're going to incentivize more people who are hosts to go and start listing on their platforms and booking on those platforms. Or even better, they're going to convince people to start going direct. In fact, in that regard, I actually had an epiphany myself, and I'm going to share with y'all a short story. This summer, one of my listings was performing like normal, and I was talking to one of my contacts. She's a realtor, and she told me about a friend of one of her family members is coming in for an internship in the summer. And she said, is it okay if she passes my information on to him? I said, I got no problem. She told me the dates he'd be coming in, and I never heard from him, so I assumed he probably found some other spot. And then a few days after he had arrived in town, I just got a random call. So I answered the phone, like, hello. And we started talking. Come to find out that whoever he was supposed to stay with for his intern, not stay with, but the company he booked with, they bailed on him at the last minute for whatever reason. So he needed somewhere to stay within the next 2 or 3 days. And after talking with him, I was able to negotiate a pretty fair rate to where he can afford to stay. And this is a corporate housing client. So his payment would be for the rest of the summer, and I would receive the payment all at once because corporate housing, it's not that uncommon to receive a full payment all at once. So it's about $4,000 that I received, well, close to the $4,500 I received to book him at one of my studio apartments. But here's the kicker: we didn't do it on Airbnb because he checked the Airbnb price and it was inflated. It's inflated on purpose because and generally speaking, I want shorter bookings during the summer to maximize income, but corporate housing is a little different. But I told him, well, we can do a cheaper rate if we're not on Airbnb. So you don't have to pay a service fee. I don't have to pay a service fee either, so I can give you a better rate. That's exactly what we did. And you want to make sure you have the proper insurance in place, short-term rental insurance or even midterm. Short-term rental insurance and corporate housing or midterm rental insurance in play. Proper, super hog, etc. We're not going to go heavy into that. But yeah, so we set that up and I typed up a lease. There are several lease templates that you can use. Just Google your state and lease template or landlord lease template. And as I was reading and filling it out, I've done this before, so it wasn't that much of a foreign concept, but obviously I took a security deposit and I was reading this line. This line said that, if the landlord puts your security deposit, which we have to give that back to the tenant, assuming that they didn't trash the whole place. If they put it in an interest savings bearing account, you're not entitled to any additional income made off your security deposit. And that got me really thinking. So Airbnb does a lot of work for us as hosts, but one thing that they're doing all that work, they take away a lot of advantages that we would have if we were booking direct. And one of them is you take a security deposit. Airbnb is taking like the risk for you, and then they'll cover you using air cover and all that stuff. But let's just stick with the traditional method of you get a security deposit. Now, let's say you have a lot of apartments, a lot of properties. The average security deposit, if someone has good stellar credit and like them or whatever, it could just be like $300. But let's just assume that they're a complete stranger. It's usually 1 month's worth of rent. And if this is corporate housing, these contracts can last from 3 months to almost a full year. So you just have this $1,500 just sitting in a bank account, and it doesn't take that many properties for you to have like a lot of money that can just be sitting in a high interest savings account. And let's say you put it in This is the financial anatomy in me. So what account are we gonna put it in? I'll just say Ally Bank, just because I can't think of anyone else at the moment. But they last I checked, they had a 4.25 savings interest rate. So you just put it in there, and it just keeps accumulating interest. And then when it's time for your tenants to check out, you obviously give the security deposit back minus any expenses. But that's just money sitting there making you more money. And if you have a lot of properties, that's just free money. Uh, a lot of banks have a maximum amount they're willing to pay for savings interest in a year. It's usually $5,000. Well, once that happens and you maxed out a bank account, just move the money to another high interest savings account and repeat the process. Now you might be thinking, well, $5,000 a year, that's not that much money, right? Technically it's not, but it's money you didn't have to do anything for. It's the definition of passive income. And even if it's not that much money, how about this? You're going to be taxed on that income like anything else, right? Why don't you just take all the income that you made off of these security deposits and throw it at your tax bill for the end of the year? So it's literally lowering your tax bill just for putting money in an account that you got to get back to the tenants anyway, but it's still lowering your tax bill in the process. You see, you have that opportunity if you're booking direct, but you don't have that with Airbnb or Verbo or any of these OTAs. So I share that story just because I want y'all to actually just think about that. Because I didn't think about it for a good while until I actually got this corporate housing tenant. I was just like, wow, like Airbnb does a lot. They bring people to you fairly easy. It's not that hard to get the algorithm to send people your way. But there is a trade-off, and trade-offs are things like this. Let me know in the comments, what do y'all think about that? I really felt the need to share that. And since we're talking about the cancellation policy and the changes in this segment of the podcast or this video, if I'm going to clip it, I think it's pretty relevant, right?